VOX's famous map animation. I'm going to be giving you the secrets to how they're doing it in this tutorial here. This is also going to be a tad bit more advanced from what VOX does, but it's pretty easy to do. Do not worry. It's going to set the foundations for you to be able to do any map animation in the future. Now, quick shout out to Mapal for originally doing this advanced map animation. I'd figure I would do my own rendition of it. Now, before we get into the tutorial, there's a special offer that's going on with my Leverage Editor community and program. Within 1 week of this video, April 20th, I'll be hosting a live workshop within our community. In this workshop, I'm going to be going over the exact steps I've taken to grow a $30,000 a month video editing agency. Now, whether you're a video editor who wants to just get a high-paying video editing job, or you want to scale your video editing business, this workshop is for you. I'll be going over the exact secrets that I've used to grow my agency to over $30,000 a month. In joining our community and these workshops, you will also have access to the program where I'll teach you to become an average or okay editor to an advanced editor who's able to create great quality of work like the Iman Ghazi, Ali Abdal, VOX style, or even my style that has gotten me millions of views. In addition to that, there's training to teach you how to attract top paying clients like top influencers and brands. Once again, we'll be hosting this exclusive workshop if you opt into our program and community. It's available for all those members who are in it. We'll be hosting it on April 20th. So the link is in the description for you to enroll right now. You do not want to miss it. With that, let's get into this tutorial. All right, we're here in After Effects, and the first thing we want to do is obviously have a new composition like this opened up. I'll go over to my composition settings. I want it to be this exact size here, and also you want to leave a little bit room for duration, so around 15 seconds is good, and then hit OK. From here, what we want to do is add our map. If you want access to the assets and project file that I'm using in this tutorial, you'll be able to find that in our Leverage Editor community and program. If you don't want to opt into that program, totally fine, although we will help you out in it. You can find these assets on Google. Just might take a little bit for you to search. So I'm going to take this world map, I'm going to put it right into our composition. From here, I'm going to right click and pre-compose it. Now, when we pre-compose, we really want to make sure that this leave all attributes in map tutorial or composition. We want to make sure that this is checked. And I'm also just going to change the name to large map. And then we want to hit OK. So what this is going to allow us to do is double click into our layer, and it's going to open up a new composition that's the actual size of the map. The key for the VOX map animations and making it look really clean is having a high resolution map. That's the key, because we're going to be scaling in pretty far. And if you have a low resolution map and you scale in, obviously it's not going to look good. So in this composition here, this is where we're going to add all of our elements. And then in this composition here, that's where we'll begin to animate the camera. But for now, let's keep it easy. Let's set up this scene first. I always like to set up the scene, and we're going to add some elements. So I'm going to go up to the circle or the ellipse tool here, click on that. I'm going to click over Tokyo here, click and drag while holding shift. That's going to make a perfect circle. I like the red that we have, so you can change the stroke to this red. You might want to up the stroke a little bit too. Copy that color code, and then we're going to up it by a little bit. And then I'm going to put the anchor point in the middle of this circle here just by clicking this on motion tools. If you don't have motion tools, definitely recommend downloading it. It's completely free. It just has some quick fix options here that make it easy, just like putting the anchor point in the middle of this circle. So I'm going to hit S on my keyboard. Just going to scale it down a little bit more. That should look good. And then we're going to put it right over Tokyo here. Going to up the stroke a little bit as well. Scale it down. That should be good. Now from here, we want to create a line going from Tokyo to San Francisco. So I'm going to go up to my pen tool. Make sure nothing is selected in my timeline here. I'm going to click in the middle of the circle, click one over on San Francisco. I'm going to drag it. So we're creating a little bit of a arc to it, just like that. And then we're going to turn down the stroke. Keep the red that we have, or if you want to change the color, whatever color you want to use is fine. Put the stroke around 5. Should be good for now. And that looks pretty good. Now I'm going to duplicate the circle layer here by hitting Command D. It's going to allow me to click and drag this. So I hit V on my keyboard, bring up my regular cursor, and I'm going to drag this over to San Francisco. I'm going to zoom in to make sure that we're in the red spot here. So right there is pretty good. All right, it's looking good. Now we're going to add our plane in there. So I have my airplane asset. Once again, if you want this particular asset, make sure to join the Leverage Editor program and community. A lot of great success is happening with our editors in there. A lot of them are landing clients. A lot of them are getting close to millions of views on their own accounts. So definitely join, and you'll unlock all that as well as the project files to anything that I work on. So I'm going to toss this in here. I'm going to hit S on my keyboard to scale it down. We want to put it over Tokyo and scale it down a lot. That should be good now, around 11%. So this is where things are going to get interesting, because now we have to make everything in 3D, and you need to follow along. It's not that complicated. It's just, if you follow along, don't be jumping around the tutorial. If this is your first time dealing with 3D scenes, if you jump around, it's not going to make sense. So you definitely want to follow along. So what I'm going to do here is make everything a 3D layer. So I'm checking off everything right here to be a 3D layer. And then I'm going to do 2 views here. So in the view drop down, we're going to click 2. On the left, we're going to see that it may not look like this if you hit 2 views. It might look different to you. That's totally fine. What we need to do is make sure that we change the right. So I click on the left area here. You can see when I click on each area, like it becomes highlighted with these blue triangles here. Make sure you're clicked on this one. Go over to this drop down tab here, and we're going to do custom view 1. That's just going to bring up a custom view of the 3D scene for us where we can manipulate it. So on the right here is our active camera, just the top down view. And then on our left here is our custom view. So with this, what I'm going to do is go up the top left here and click orbit around cursor tool. I'm going to click into our custom view, and I'm going to just position it how I want to. I just want it a little flat here. This is what it's kind of going to look like when we actually go ahead and animate it with the camera. So it's going to be a little blurry when we zoom in. That's the only sucky part about it. It won't be blurry when we actually begin to animate it, but we kind of have to deal with the blurriness for now. I don't know why, even though it's very high quality, we just unfortunately have to deal with it. So we can see the airplane there, but it's not actually how we want to. So I'm going to hit R on my keyboard. That's going to bring up our rotation settings. For the X rotation, I'm going to change it to 90. Okay. You notice as soon as I change it to 90 degrees, you can't really see it on this top down view, but you can see it in our custom camera angle view. And we can also see that it's going through the map. So what we want to do, pull it above, just right above. So it's sitting on top. And we could even see on this view that it's not perfectly in the center of the circle. So I'm going to take the Z here and drag it forward. And then we could even take the X to drag it to the right here. So what we're doing is just positioning things to make sure, it's in the right area. So we got the airplane. Now what we want to do is start adding the buildings to it. So I have this Tokyo Sky Tower. I'm going to drop it into our right side here. And obviously it's really big, so I'm going to zoom out and then we can scale it down. So I'm going to hit S on my keyboard, scale it down. We'll go like, I think like 6% will probably be a good size for it. Then we kind of just want to position it a little bit over the circle. And then from here, we're going to check the 3D layer. As soon as we check it, you'll notice it'll pop up on the left camera view here. From here, what we want to do is also rotate it on the X axis by 90 degrees. So I'm going to type in 90 there and it disappears. So what we need to do is pull up the Y so we see it. So I'm pulling that up. It's behind the plane too. We can see that the plane's right here. It's this little thin this layer here, and then the skyscraper, the city, is behind the plane. So I also want to kind of pivot it on the y-axis here, just kind of adding a little bit of depth to it. That's pretty good, and it's in a good spot. Now we're going to add our other skyscrapers to it. So I have this one here. I'm just going to drag it on. Obviously it's way too big, so we're going to do the exact same thing. Scale it down. We'll try around like 7%, see how that looks, and then we're going to 3D toggle it. Change the X rotation to 90 degrees, and we can see that it's also in the map. So I'm going to pull it up. I want this to just sit barely on top of the map. And I also want it in front of the plane here. We're creating some depth. I'm going to move it to the left. So the goal is to create some depth here and have some buildings in front, some buildings behind, and the plane behind some buildings as well. It's just going to create that 3D scene for us. Now it's a little hard to see. We could kind of see what's going on here on the top down view here, where we have a building here, the plane's right here, and the other skyscraper is back here. We're just going to keep on adding more buildings. So I'm going to toss this one in here, scale down. Same exact steps here. We want to scale down to around 6%. Going to change this to a 3D layer. We'll see it pop up on our camera view. I'm going to take the Z, bring it up. I'm going to take the Z axis and then just bring it up. So one thing we need to do to this is make it 90 degrees on the X axis. And then we can take the Y and bring it up. Kind of want to put this behind the plane here. And we get on our right view here. We can adjust the positioning of it. Put a little bit in front of the other city, so we can see the other cities here. This one's resting here, one building's right here, the plane's right here. So we're creating that depth, like I said. Also want to make sure it's just resting on the actual map. It's got another building I want to add here. Scale that down around like 6%, should work. Kind of put this where we want it. Then I'm going to toggle the 3D mode. For the X rotation, we want to change that to 90. We're going to see it on the camera view here now. And now we just want to put it in a spot where we want. Kind of want it back here a little bit, actually. I'm going to scale it down a little bit more. So around like 4%. Yeah, put it in the back right here. Looks good. We can also push it back, create more depth. And then I believe we have one more building that we're going to toss in and just around 6%. Put it in the right area, kind of. Toggle 3D. Change the X rotation to 90 degrees. And then put it in the right position here. So I want this one kind of in front of the plane. So it blocks it off a little bit. You could honestly scale this down to 5% too. It looks a little too big. It looks good. We're just positioning it. So we're building that 3D scene and then we're going to animate later. Okay. So that looks good. The city looks good. One thing that I almost forgot to do, the actual arc that we see here needs to be 3D as well. Right now it's just resting on the map. So what we need to do is go over to this arc layer. We should honestly name it too as well. Call it arc. We want to be organized here. Okay, so with this arc layer, what we want to do is put the anchor point in the middle of it. So once again, I'm going to use motion tools. I'm going to hit this middle thing, and now the anchor point is perfectly in the middle. If you don't have motion tools, what you can do is hit Y on your keyboard and adjust the anchor point from there, but definitely recommend getting motion tools. From here, we're going to hit R on our keyboard to bring up the rotation settings. For X rotation, we also want to change that to 90 degrees. You'll notice one thing, as soon as we change it to 90 degrees, it's not in the right area. So we need to take the Z here and drag it forward. Okay, so that it's on the left here. It's right in the middle of the circle. And then we can see on this view that it's cutting in and out of the map. So we need to take the Y and drag that up. So it's sitting right, the start of it is right on that circle. Okay, and then we can see on this side, it's not perfectly aligned. So we need to take the Y and rotate it. So that we see it's right on there. Check the left side. We might have to do a little less rotation and change the Z, push it back a bit. That should be good. If we look on our left camera view, looks like it's resting a little bit above too much on this side. So it seems like the Z rotation needs to happen a little bit here. Just checking to make sure that they're both in the right area. We need to touch right there. Then we can bring it down a little bit on the Y. It's positioning things right, on the right positioning in this 3D space for it. All right, that's good enough for now. So what we have is our circle, our line, our plane in the middle, a little bit of a city, and we want to add some clouds on the way. So the plane's going to be traveling from here to San Francisco, and we want to add some clouds in there. So I have this cloud asset for you to use. Once again, you can find it online if you just look up cloud in Google. If you want the project file and all the assets the exact assets that I'm using, check out our Leverage School and come join. A lot of great things are happening there. I gave you the pitch in the beginning to join, so whatever you feel like doing. We're just going to place this in our scene, scale it down quite a bit. We want to put it within this line. Might be hard on your area to see, but the line on the right, we want some in the front of it and some in the back. I'm just going to scale this down a little bit more, around like 8%. Should be good. I'm going to hit T on my keyboard to bring up the opacity settings. We're going to change the opacity to like 60%, not 6%, 60. And then I'm going to toggle the 3D mode here. We're going to change the X rotation to 90. Zoom in over here. We can see that it's sitting within our map. So we need to take that Y and really bring it up. And we still want to make sure, we can even rotate it a little bit. Actually, it's fine. We actually don't need to rotate. But we want to make sure it's in front of our line because our plane is going to travel through the clouds and we want to create some depth within that. So we want it in front of our arc here. I'm going to Command D this. What we can then do, take the one that we just duplicated and push it behind. And we can stagger it as well. Change the opacity, maybe make it a little bit more solid. So change it to 70%. Then we can click on both of these and duplicate. Grab the ones that we just duplicated, bring that over to the left, or actually, I'm sorry, to the right. And then we can see in our camera view, we want to follow this arc a little bit. So I'm going to drag it up. One thing that we can actually do too with one of the duplicated layers is I'm going to flip it around. We're just dragging it and flipping it here. That's just going to create a little bit more organicness to it. We don't want to look like it's a copied and paste thing. As well with the one that's sitting in the front, I'm going to change the opacity to more like 40%, just kind of randomizing things a little bit. You can take all of these, Command D to duplicate, take all those duplicated layers and drag it to the right. And then of course we want to follow the arc here. I'm going to bring it up, create a little bit more randomness by messing with the depths of everything. So we can push things back, push things forward. It just gives us a little bit more of a 3D-esque type of environment here that we really want. Key to making 3D environments look good is really creating that depth within everything. I'm going to take everything that we just did, duplicate it one more time by hitting Command D, and then we can drag everything to the right. Now that everything is pretty much dragged to the right here, we can just, once again, mess with the depths of everything. So before I let go, I'm actually going to take all these layers and just put them on top. That'll allow us to manipulate these a little bit better, and we can figure out, which one is which here. So we just need to put them all in the right location just by clicking on a layer and then figuring out which one it is and dragging it up. So yeah, just click in, putting things in the right location. You could even see in our right view where everything is kind of at. I think that's pretty good for now. Like, we have some clouds in there where the plane's going to travel through and it's going to get to San Francisco. All right, so that's setting up our 3D scene. Once that's all set up, now it's just animation from here on out. I always like to set up the scene first and then animate later, which makes it a lot easier for us. So for the animation, we want to animate this circle in first. That's the first thing that's going to come in. So I'm going to take all my layers here and just collapse everything. Figure out what is this dot or this circle. Okay. So we're going to figure out what this dot is, and we want this to just easily scale in. So I'm going to bring my playhead to the left all the way to the beginning of the composition. Hit S on my keyboard. That's going to bring up our scale. I'm going to create a keyframe, drag this keyframe to the right, and make it 0 in the beginning. So send 2 keyframes here, highlight both of them, right click, keyframe assistant, easy ease, go over to our graph editor, click on the one on the right, and these 2 yellow things will pop up. Just drag the one to the left and you should be good. So if we look at our animation here on our right view, should just be scaling in nicely. We obviously might need to mess with the timing of everything, but I think it looks pretty good now. So it looks good. That's coming in. The next thing that we want to come in after all of this is the buildings here. So I'm going to take these buildings, drag it to the right. That's where we want it. I'm going to take all these clouds. We can drag this all the way to the right as well. We'll deal with those later. So the circle comes up. I'm actually going to make the circle come up in a second and a half. And then also the arc, we want that coming up later. Now we want some buildings to pop in. So the first building that I really want to pop in is the one that's all the way in the back, as that will probably cause the most depth within the image. So I'm going to also take this airplane. We want this to come in a little bit later as well. So I'm going to drag that to the right, and we're going to find out the building here. All right, so I have it clicked, have it highlighted here. I'm going to bring my playhead to the beginning of it, and I'm going to hit P on my keyboard to bring up position, create a keyframe for that, drag that out to the right. And then what we want to do here is in our left camera view, we want to drag this down on the Y axis to where it's out of view, where it's cutting into the actual map and it's actually going underneath the map. So this is how we're going to get it to pop in. So we dragged it underneath and then it's popping in its regular position. So I'm going to highlight both these keyframes, right click, keyframe assistant, easy ease, go over the graph editor, drag this to the left. That's pretty much all we're going to do with the buildings here. It's that exact sequence. Of course, we want to find out the timing of these keyframes. It's hard to find the timing because on the left view, we're not going to be able to see the animation that well. We kind of just have to judge with the right view to see if that timing is good. It looked a little too quick, so I'm going to drag it to the right. You have to look at the right view because it won't pop up on the left. All right, so the timing didn't look too bad there. Now we're going to move on to another skyscraper. We can find one that's in the foreground here. So we got this one here. I'm going to bring my playhead to the beginning, hit P on my keyboard to bring up position, hit a keyframe, drag that out to the right. We can mess with the speed as well. It will cause a little bit more of an organic feel to it if you mess with the speed. Then from here, we just need to take that Y and bring it down below the map. This is where it's just cutting out. Highlight both keyframes, right click, keyframe assistant, easy ease, go over to the graph editor, drag that to the left here and go back. And then we can stagger it as well. We don't want it coming in at the exact same time. It'll look awkward if it does. It won't look natural. Find the next skyscraper that you want to work with, bring your playhead to the beginning of it, hit P on your keyboard, same exact sequence, create a keyframe for position, drag it out to the right here, and then we're just going to take the Y position of it and bring it below the map. Okay, highlight both keyframes, right click, keyframe assistant, easy ease, go over the graph editor, change that to look like that. Should be good. Move on to the next one, hit P on the keyboard, create a keyframe for position, bring that out to the right, and we want this to go under the map. Highlight both keyframes, keyframe assistant, easy ease, graph editor, bring that to the left. One thing I noticed, it looks like the first skyscraper is actually peeking out in the beginning here, so we want that to be below the map. One more skyscraper to work with. I'm going to bring my playhead all the way to the left here, hit P on the keyboard, create a keyframe for position, drag that to the right, and then we want this going out of the map here. Highlight both keyframes, right click, keyframe assistant, easy ease, go over the graph editor, drag that to the left. Should be good. And then we can stagger these as well. We don't want them all coming in at the same time. So what it looks like here is the circle pops in. We can see it on our right camera view, and then all of these come in. We can kind of see it on our left as I drag the playhead. The next thing we want is our plane to come in. So after all these buildings, this last building begins to pop up, that's when we want this plane here. So right around here, what I'm going to have it do is fade in and then follow that arc. So to do that, I'm gonna hit T on my keyboard, create a keyframe for opacity, drag that keyframe out to the right quite a bit, make it 0 here. Actually, we probably want to make this a little bit quicker, so I'm going to drag that back to the left. And then from here, I'm going to drop everything down where we can see the transform settings, create a keyframe for position. And then what we want to do is drag our playhead all the way to the right a little bit, then take this x-axis, drag it all the way to the new position here, and then we want to take the Z to push it back so it's following that arc and landing right on top of the new circle here. So the hardest part about this is figuring out the timing. Probably a little way too quick here, so I'm going to drag that out by a little bit. One thing I'm going to do is drag this keyframe all the way to 14 seconds. I actually want to have this come in around 5. We want to kind of push things back a little bit here. Have this first dot come in a little later. Dot 2, we'll deal with that a little bit later. The arc needs to come in at the same time as the plane here. And these things can come in a little bit later, in my opinion. We want to stagger this a little bit more, give it a little more organic feel. Then this plane comes in, have it come in around 5 seconds and then travel around to 14 seconds. So that's where we want it, that last keyframe to be, is around 14 seconds here. Okay. What we want to do from here is once we have those keyframes going where the plane is flying from one area to the other, we notice that it's not following this arc. So a couple things we want to do. First off, put where the plane is kind of in the middle of its journey here. And we want to just change the rotation a little bit on this camera. So I'm going to go up to this orbit around cursor tool. I'm going to make it a little bit more flat so we could kind of see what's going on. I'm going to hit V on my keyboard. Once you hit V, click on this little keyframe right here, that little box. You'll see this little, I don't know what you call it, little anchor point pop up. We can click and drag this and bring it as the same arc as our actual arc here, as the red arc. So I'm clicking and dragging that, making it as the same arc. You'll see this one pop up here. We can do the same here and just figure out kind of what works. Okay, so we have that going on. Now it's following that arc, but there's a problem. It's behind the actual red line. So what that arc did was really take it and put it behind the red line a little bit. So what we need to do is make sure to put it in front. So how we do that is put your plane in the middle of the arc, and we're going to take this Z and just drag that forward. Okay, dragging that forward and just putting it in line is really all you need to do here. What you can do is also take this top view and drag that a little forward as well. So now it's, following that line. We might need to adjust the height a little bit. It's totally fine. As long as it follows the path, the general path of it, we should be good. Okay. Another issue that we're having here is obviously the plane doesn't take off like it's hovering. It needs to rotate with the arc. This is actually pretty easy. We want to bring our playhead to the beginning. I'm actually going to turn up the opacity so we can see what's happening here with the plane. Make sure you're on that keyframe in the beginning when you do that. We're going to create a keyframe for the Z rotation. All right, I'm going to bring it so it's kind of pointing up here with the arc. And then we want to go to the middle because the middle is going to level out. To easily go to this keyframe, we want to match the keyframes here. Click on this, go to next keyframe. It's going to jump to the very middle here. Obviously, the plane is like facing up, so we want to level it out. And then we're going to go to the end here by going jump to end. And if we look at the end, pretty leveled out. So we actually might want to bring it into the middle here. So our plane's kind of in that middle of that arc, and we're going to point it down. And then we're going to go to the right, jump to the last one. So obviously the plane doesn't land pointing down like that. We're just going to level it out. So that really needs to happen. I'm going to adjust the Z so it's a little bit in front of that red line as well. Now this is the journey. Goes through some clouds, levels out, goes down, should be good. Okay, so that's that. It's a little difficult. What I'm also going to do is highlight all of these keyframes, right click, keyframe assistant, easy ease. That's all you need to do to it. Don't want to do anything else. It'll just make it a little bit smoother. From here, we want the clouds to pop up. This is pretty easy. So what we want to do is add a little fade to it. So I'm going to select all of these layers, hit T on my keyboard, drag my playhead to the beginning, create a keyframe for opacity, drag that out to the right, and then make it 0. Everything will change to 0. So now that they're all coming in, and what we can do is really just stagger these clouds. This is going to give it a little bit more of a organic kind of feel. So those clouds stagger in there, or the opacity kind of staggers in. We can mess with it a little bit more here too. And then one more thing that we want to add to the clouds. I promise you this is going to look better once we're done animating stuff on this view here. The last thing we want to add to the clouds is this turbulent displace effect. So I'm just going to toss it onto the very first cloud here. From there, I'm going to change the amount to 20, and then the size to 4. Okay, we're going to drop down the evolution options, and then I'm going to hold down option on a Mac. On a PC it might be control, and then you're going to hit a keyframe for random seed. This is going to bring up our expressions window. I'm going to delete everything that's in there and type in time star and then 7. Okay, that's going to add this jitter effect to our cloud. You might see a little error thing come up. It should be fine. It just gets a little wonky. So we're going to take this turbulent displace and paste this onto all of our other clouds here. So I'm going to hit Command V to paste, and we should be good. If this really slows down your computer, I recommend just coming back to this part at the end, when like right before you export. This can be pretty computer intensive, so you don't have to do this at the moment. All right, that's pretty much it. That's our little animation. Now we need to animate the camera. So what we want to do now is go back to our original composition. This is the first composition that we made, and we're gonna manipulate a camera to get this 3D effect. So first thing that we need to do is actually toggle the 3D on this layer here, and this is extremely important. If you don't toggle this thing right here, it looks like a little star. The 3D layers that we made on the larger map composition won't show up on this. It won't look right. So make sure that this is toggled. From here, what we're going to do is right click, go to new, and we're going to do a new camera. Okay. Call it whatever you want. I'm just going to keep it as camera 1. We also want to enable the depth of field. So copy all of these settings here. Once that's copied, hit OK. Now that the depth of field is enabled, we can drop down our transform tools for the camera. I'm going to create a keyframe for all these settings here, and we want to make sure our playhead's at the beginning when we do this too. From here, what I can do is take my dolly cursor tool, zoom out, and you'll notice that when I zoom out, things get blurry, and I'll explain why in a second. And then the pan under cursor tool, we can take that and drag this to the left here, or to the right. And I'm gonna zoom in a little bit more. So right here looks pretty good. So what I want to happen is the camera to zoom in and then create a little 3D effect and then follow the plane. So what we also need to do is create 2 views as well. So I'm gonna hit 2 views. This view here, we actually wanna change this view, the custom view, to, we're gonna drop this down, we're gonna change it to a right view. So this might be a little confusing, but here's our camera. This is a 3D scene. So we're looking at this map from the right view. It looks very thin, as well as all our other things that we placed on it, because this is the right view of the 3D scene. Okay. So one thing that we also want to create a keyframe for in our camera is our focus distance. So create a keyframe for that. Make sure your playhead's at the beginning. And I'm going to drag my playhead out to the right a little bit. So right around like a second and a half. That's when we want it to tilt and pretty much be in its position of where it needs to be. So I'm going to take my dolly towards cursor tool, zoom in a little bit. Okay. We're going to zoom in. And then I'm going to go over to my map, the large map, drop down the transform settings. And we're going to create a keyframe. We're going to go back to the beginning here. And we're going to create a keyframe for all of these settings here as well. And I'm going to snap to where our camera zooms in, these keyframes right here. We're going to take the X rotation and make it almost flat. You can see in our right view, it's starting to come flat. So right about here should be good. We can take our dolly tool or this pan under cursor tool and just get the right positioning of it. Okay, so I know things look blurry, but it zooms in and lays it flat right here. It looks pretty cool, right? So one thing with this, like I was saying, it looks pretty blurry in the beginning. We need to adjust the focal distance or the focus distance. So make sure your playhead's at the beginning where all these keyframes are at. And we're going to take the focus distance. You can see in the right view that this new line appears. We want this line to be touching where our map is. So this thin line right here, this thin line is our map. We want that focus distance to be right in line with that map. That means it's perfectly focused on this map layer. And then we're going to snap to the right here. Obviously things look pretty unfocused. So we need to match that focus distance again with the area of where the red dot is. We can see this is where all the buildings are within our map. Our map's tilted like this, and the focus distance needs to match that. So I'm gonna hold down shift to adjust the numbers a little bit better. You can see I'm dragging that line to right where that dot is, right where all of our stuff is. And we can see on the right view that in the back here, it's unfocused. In the front foreground, it's unfocused. But right where that dot is, it's perfectly focused. And that gives us a nice depth of field effect. So one thing that I can do as well, I'm gonna drag these out a little bit to where the buildings start to pop up. So right when those buildings come up, yeah, right here looks good. Maybe I wanna zoom in a little bit more to be honest. So I'm gonna snap to this keyframes, go to my dolly towards cursor tool, zoom this in a little more. So since it's zoomed in, what I need to do is go back to my focus distance and bring that to the appropriate area. So I'm lining up with all these buildings. You can see that line right there. So it's looking pretty cool. So one thing I noticed is when the plane does start to appear in this view, it's obviously like it appears right away because we forgot to readjust the opacity settings, but it's also like cutting into the map. So I'm going to go back into this large map sequence here, and we're going to find our plane. So this layer here, make sure we're at the beginning of the layer here. I'm going to hit U on my keyboard. That's going to bring up all the keyframes that we've made for it. I'm going to hit V on my keyboard to make sure I have the regular cursor. We just want to drag the Y up so it's not cutting into the map. And then also the opacity, we want that to be 0 again. Now, if we switch back to our regular actual like view that we want, the other composition, we can see that the plane comes in nicely. Another thing that I forgot is the actual arc. We want that to be animated as well. So I'm going to go back into my map. So that arc should appear when the plane appears. This is a really simple animation that we're going to do. Make sure the playhead's at the beginning of it. I'm going to drop down the settings here to where we see add. I'm going to click on that. We're going to do add trim paths. We're going to drop down trim paths, and we're going to figure out what percentage we manipulate that makes it move in the right direction. So if I increase the start, it's deleting everything from left to right. So we don't want to do that one. We actually want to use the end keyframe. I'm actually going to create a keyframe for that, drag that out to the right, and make this 0. So now it should be coming in from left to right. And we also want to line this up with the end of the plane. So right about here. We can keep it a little bit behind, or like it takes a little bit longer to get in. And we can highlight both these keyframes, right click keyframe assistant, easy ease. That's all we need to add to it. So we go back to our other composition. We can see when the plane comes up, so does that line. It's a little bit behind, so I'm going to go back and just bring this a little more forward. And it should match the plane decently well. What we can also do is go into the middle, make sure that it's matching the middle as well. So it actually starts to get ahead. So we just want to adjust it throughout so it's falling. So it's a little behind here. So I'm going to just increase the percentage so it's right behind the plane. Okay. Drag it again. So it's way forward here. So I'm going to decrease it. Okay. Drag it again. Still a little ahead here. So I'm going to decrease it. It should be good. All right. So we're going to go back to our other composition. Things are looking good. Plane goes up. So now we want to animate the camera to follow the plane. So when the plane comes up, I'm actually going to drag my playhead all the way out to the right, go over to pan under cursor tool. I'm going to drag this all the way to the left here, bring it to right where we want to see this thing land. So we want it right about here. And then we're going to just drag these keyframes to right here. So take these keyframes, bring it right over there. Then we're going to go to the middle of it. Obviously, it's not in the right area. So I'm going to pan it back up. And I actually want to zoom in on it too as well. We're going to do a little zoom. Okay, I know it's really out of focus. We'll fix that. And one thing we also want to do is take the X rotation of it. And I want to make it a little bit more flat so we can see the plane on a nice, like close to 90-degree angle, which should look good. So something like that. And then we can just position it right. So right here, it's following it pretty well. So yeah. And I also want to get maybe a little bit more closer as well. We can get a tad bit closer. So we want to find those middle keyframes, snap to them, go to the dollar towards cursor tool, and we want to zoom in a little bit more here. So I know it's really out of focus, so we need to fix that now. So snap back to these first keyframes, like right when it starts to move. So I'm going to snap to them, find my focal distance, go over to the middle here. We can snap to those middle keyframes, take this focal distance and figure out the right numbers of where it needs to be. So it's really focused on the back. So I need to bring this forward, and we can see in our right camera view here, it's actually, we can see those lines of like where it needs to be. So right on that plane. And then of course, as it zooms out here, we want it to focus on the plane. So I'm going to snap to the end here and choose the right focal distance for that. So if we play this back, we can watch to make sure things are fitting here. So one thing I'm noticing is in the beginning, it's not on the actual plane. So I'm going to just like right in the middle of this and just follow the plane a little bit more. So I'm taking my pan under cursor tool and just putting it more on the plane. It's a little out of focus too. So we can adjust that focal distance as well. Basically we want it focused on that plane the entire time. And just find any area where it looks bad. I think it's everything's looking pretty good right now. All right, so one thing we want to do with all these camera keyframes, it's looking pretty good if we watch it. It still just feels a little too rigid, obviously with the keyframes here. So one thing that we do want to do is ease this. And the way I'm going to do that is just by highlighting all these keyframes. We could also take the map keyframes that we created and right click keyframe assistant, easy ease. Or actually what I'm going to do is use this thing called flow. If you don't have this, definitely recommend downloading it. It just allows you to manipulate the graph a little bit better. And I could just hit apply and it's going to make things a little bit more smoother. Now, if you don't have it, easy ease is fine. You just might have to adjust the keyframes a little bit to get that smoothness that you are looking for. All right, so not bad. There's some things that I could fix up as far as keyframing and timing of everything, but for tutorial purposes, it's fine. It's actually looking pretty cool. Now we're going to add the finishing touches to everything. This really ties it in. It looks good, but we want to make it a little bit more, I don't know, make it feel a little bit more real, you know? So one thing to do is actually make these glow. So I'm going to go back into my large map composition here. We can change this back to one view. And we want to make these dots glow. So I'm going to go over to dot number 1. I'm going to look up deep glow. So if you don't have deep glow, just use the regular After Effects glow effect, but definitely recommend downloading this deep glow if you do not have it. I think it's like $50. It just gets the desired effect that we're going for a little bit easier. You certainly can get this effect with the After Effects deep glow, but with the After Effects glow, it just might take you a little bit longer to get it to look like this. But I'm just going to turn down the exposure on this a little bit. Probably 0.10 should be good. I'm going to take this deep glow and copy it over to the arc. Can't really see the arc, but I'm going to turn up the exposure by like 0.15. Should be good. And then we can also copy that deep glow that we originally had copied over to the second dot. Now if we go back to the regular composition, look at the glow of it. Okay, so one thing, when we apply that glow, it's actually kind of disappeared in this layer. So what we need to do is just drag this above. So I'm going to go over to 2 views here. Take my orbit tool and first off change this to custom view, zoom out here and find the little thing. And we just want to bring this up in Z space a little bit so we can see it, just so it's resting on top of the map. And we probably have to do the exact same thing for the other dot here. Yep. So I'm going to click on this other dot, just drag it up in Z space so it's resting just above the map. Okay, so it brought just above. Now if we go back to our map, we should be able to see it in the beginning here. Yep, looks good. Now, the next thing that we want to add to this is a little bit of a grain effect. So I'm going to right click new adjustment layer. On this, I'm going to toss on a noise. Just look up, or actually look up grain and just add grain to that adjustment layer. We're going to change the viewing mode from preview to final output. And I'm not going to change anything. I actually like the way it is right now. That should be good. If you want, we can throw a image in the background here. To do that, I have a sky background. I'm just going to toss this into our composition. We're going to make it a 3D layer. Go back to 2 views here. We're going to change this left view over here to actually our from the right side here. This will let us know where the sky background's positioned. So it's in the middle of this map. We actually want to take it and drag it all the way back here. And then we need to scale it up. So I'm going to hit S on my keyboard and really scale this up, really drag it back. One thing to do is make sure that the layer is behind the map, and then we can take it, make sure it's in the right spot. So we're going to go ahead and see what it looks like. There we go. The last thing to do here is toggle the motion thing here. It's just going to give everything a little bit of a motion blur. So we want to toggle that, and then we're going to play it back, and I think we're pretty much done. Alrighty, so this is our final animation. Obviously, there's a couple things that can be adjusted as far as keyframing and timing of things, but for tutorial purposes, this is pretty good. So on your own time, you can adjust it. But once again, thanks for watching. Now, if you want to learn how to do more advanced stuff like this, make sure to join our Leverage Editor program and community. We're also having a little bit of a workshop. It's going to be 3 videos. It's going to be 3 live sessions of me going over how to scale your editing agency, whether you're an editor who just wants to land a high-paying client, or you're an editor who wants to build out something a little bit bigger. I'll be going over that in a 3-part live workshop that's going on within our community right now. So make sure you join for that. And with the link in the description is there for you to join. And there's a lot of other training and, networking challenges that we do. And there's a lot of training. We have a training program in there. There's challenges we do, coaches. All of that is currently in the community. Make sure that you go ahead and join, and I'll see you there. Thanks for watching this video. Peace.